Clearly one of the best investments I've ever been involved in. Just get the damn vaccine.
Welcome to episode 3 of The Truth About Vaccines presents Remedy. I'm Charlene Bollinger, and this is my husband, Ty. We're your hosts, and we're so thankful that you've tuned in.
Hopefully you watched episode 2 last night, and you learned a lot of great information, and were able to absorb some of the many remedies that are available to you. But just in case you missed it, here's a brief recap.
The vaccine agenda is nothing more than a massive global experiment, and they're tracking what their toxins and venoms and poisons are doing in your body to create what diseases, so they can create new drugs to sell you for the rest of your life. That's the entire vaccine agenda. It's all one big experiment.
Vaccines are classified for tort liability purposes as unavoidably unsafe.
There is literally no liability associated with it. When you look at the 1986 National Child Vaccine Injury Act, and you look at then the Brucewitz versus Wyeth decision in 2011, it is impossible to sue a vaccine manufacturer for an injury.
If you are a physician and you are following a public health diktat or standard of care that comes down from a government agency that is not in the best interest of your patient, this is a conflict of interest.
So we have a situation here where there's conflict of interest. These medical associations cannot possibly interpret information with fair balance because so much money has been given to them that tips the scale and tips their opinion in favor of mass vaccination.
So it is a conflict of interest inherent in many of these medical facilities and associations to promote vaccination because they profit directly and indirectly from it.
And they're free. You go get these shots for free to keep you safe, or you can trust Ty and John and go get some vitamin C, vitamin D, some zinc, maybe some ozone, hydrogen peroxide, but it's all out of your pocket. It doesn't cost you anything because insurance won't pay for any of that.
Can we look at the, for example, the FDA's PowerPoint they released before the vaccine showing they were looking for 20-something signals of, serious side effects through post-marketing surveillance, including death. When we point these things out, that should be celebrated as, okay, wow, we're actually practicing medicine ethically, but instead we're being characterized as enemies of the state, literally.
FDA gets 50% of its budget from the pharmaceutical industry in exchange for fast-tracking vaccines or other drugs.
The FDA needs to go away. The FDA needs to go away. It's quicker than any other organization. Remember, the third leading cause of death in 2019, when they killed my mom, was iatrogenic medicine.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of iatrogenic injury from those vaccines, especially in our youth.
When we see a cardiac arrest at the college and pro level, the first thing we think of now is COVID-19 vaccination and myocarditis.
It's not normal for children to have myocarditis. It's not normal for teenagers to be dropping dead of myocardial infarction while playing sports.
We now have over 200 peer-reviewed manuscripts describing COVID-19 vaccine-induced myocarditis or heart damage. The majority are in the pediatric and adolescent age group. Peak age is 18 to 24.
The polio story is very interesting. My mom grew up in that era of, watching the iron lung images on the black boob tube, the little TVs, and the horrific messaging they were able to get across to scare the population to line up for the polio. Actually, it was the oral polio back then.
The government purported that these vaccines were perfectly safe. And of course, it was discovered later on that this approximately 10-year window of vaccine production was contaminated with a virus called SV40, simian for monkey, SV40 contamination. And there are studies that link that SV40 contamination to different forms of cancer.
The polio vaccines always have caused polio.
It's not the wild virus. It's not polio wild virus, but they're actually getting vaccine-induced polio.
Everyone has seen the videos of these trucks going through neighborhoods spraying kids in the community pools, spraying kids eating lunch at school. I mean, they literally sprayed this right on them.
And the symptoms of DDT poisoning were identical to the symptoms of polio.
Kids that had any symptoms from DDT spraying on them, they were immediately stamped as having polio.
So after the polio vaccines came out, the CDC changed the definition of polio to make it appear that fewer people had polio.
The year after India was declared polio-free, there were more than 50,000 cases of non-polio acute flaccid paralysis.
The only substance that's been described to dissolve the spike protein is a Japanese discovery called nattokinase. And nattokinase is a fibrinolytic enzyme, a proteolytic enzyme produced by Bacillus subtilis natto.
Natto stimulates plasminogen. So it breaks it down naturally. In other words, it stimulates the body to do it naturally. Now this is published. It's in the journal Molecules, September of 22, degradative effects of nattokinase on spike protein of SARS-2.
Everything from vitamin D, vitamin C, all the way to hyperbaric oxygen treatment, nattokinase.
Enzymes as a remedy is really important, and I really like serrapeptase and nattokinase and other enzymes, the normal enzymes, the proteolytic enzymes, the bromelain, which is a type of proteolytic enzyme.
Things like papain and bromelain. Viruses are toxic proteins. Therefore, you have to enable your body to produce the proteolytic enzymes it needs to break those down, or you have to add proteolytic enzymes to your system.
Ozonated, it's been turned from O2 to O3 and O4 and O5, O6, O7, O8, O9, O10, O11, O12, O13. And then that goes into olive oil, which sucks up the more aggressive O3, O4, O5, O6, but allows the O7 and above to come through so I can breathe it.
For those people who think that we are losing and everything is in a state of despair and despondency, no.
Be brave. Walk through the fear of the unknown and know that God's got this. God will prevail.
In tonight's episode, we're going to investigate some of the dark history behind the hepatitis B vaccine, as well as the chickenpox and the shingles vaccines.
We'll also explore some recently released information about COVID-19 injections and, of course, provide remedies and solutions to some of the health issues that are being created by these medical interventions.
The topic of vaccines can be very polarizing, but we want to share the truth regardless of whether it's politically correct or offensive. You deserve to know the truth about this hot topic.
There are certain topics that are very polarizing, and you've heard this even within families, marriages, you name it, dinner tables, friends. They always used to say, there's a couple topics you can't speak on. Just don't bring them up. They're too polarizing. Religion and politics were always the two. Well, I think there's a third, and vaccines are definitely one of those. It has been extremely well done to create a polarizing environment, creating massive distrust and discord between those who trust vaccines and don't trust vaccines. The less they tell you, and the less they allow you to see, and the more confusion they create, they know that in human nature and human minds, naturally, in a state of confusion, we will gravitate to whatever the authority figures tell us. So as long as they can keep you confused and in the dark and not actually tell you what they're doing, they eventually can actually convince you to just have blind faith in them and trust them.
When we can't ask a question, particularly an uncomfortable question, that is dogma, that is orthodoxy. And in fact, that is indicative of governments who are trying to advance a false agenda.
Do you want to risk your life by trusting what some politicians are telling you to do? Because, I mean, how many politicians really care about our health? Right? If they cared, wouldn't they take out the fluoride out of the water? Wouldn't they start pushing, stopping Roundup from being sprayed on our lawns? Think about it, if they really cared about our health, wouldn't they stop this glyphosate from being sprayed on our food? They would, right? And so all of a sudden, they so desperately care about our health that they want to force us to get this shot that has side effects that they have no idea about. And it's just, you didn't need to be a genius to go, something stinks here.
Why is it we actually blindly accept the reality that vaccines are our savior for all infectious diseases? Why? They wanted you to think that. They have been building this narrative every day in every way for decades. And they've convinced enough of us to now rely on the fact that we don't have to do anything for our health to keep ourselves healthy. We don't have to worry about our diet. We don't have to exercise. We don't have to go outside and get sunlight. We don't have to take supplements. You can just get a shot from us, and you'll never get sick.
The fact is that the CDC's vaccine schedule has never been adequately tested, and what should be done at pediatric visits is not being done. The 2, 4, and 6-month pediatric visits are nothing more than a vaccination day.
When child go to the pediatrician at visits for 2, 4, and 6 months, what should be done on those visits is examining the child for any congenital anomalies that may be showing up, like hip dysplasia or irregular heart things, which can show up in the first 2 to 4 months of life that may not be apparent at birth. And what that visit should entail is explaining to parents, particularly if it's your first child, but every child is different, to explain to them about what the normal developmental milestones are, what to watch for as your child is growing up, where the problems are. It should be an educational event for parents, particularly a new parent. Instead, it's a vaccination day. And they can get 6 or 7 shots at the same time that have never been tested for what happens on the interaction and the side effects of these different chemicals and things that are in that particular child. The only thing that the pediatric researchers are concerned about is whether or not these combinations, when they're injected, do they all develop an antibody response? And that massive amount of antibodies that are floating around, if there's no pathogen to eliminate, they can start attacking your body, and that's what's called autoimmune disease. And it's through a process called molecular mimicry. And there's never been any testing about that.
So you have combinations of vaccines within one vaccine and or given at the same time concurrently with other vaccines on the childhood schedule, like at 2, 4, and 6 months of age. You've got the CDC recommendations for polio, Hep B, diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, rotavirus, Hib, and pneumococcal vaccines. These 8 vaccines administered during a single physician visit, never been tested for safety in combination in any clinical trials. This should be a problem for anybody who has a medical degree and or is a PhD. But if you consider just being a parent should be enough to ask questions about how come you're giving all of these shots to my child and they've never been tested in combination, and each individual one has never been tested against placebo to show safety or efficacy.
This should be a problem for any thinking parent, and it should be a problem for all medical doctors. The current vaccine schedule has never been tested for safety.
Interestingly, the CDC does have access to the Vaccine Safety Data Link, the VSD, which could finally answer the question of which group is healthier, the vaxxed or the unvaxxed. But they've never aggregated the data. The
Institutes of Medicine, people responsible for really looking at all the data in 2013, they put a report out and said there was no such study, and it probably should be done. And there's no study to show that people with adverse reactions after a vaccine don't develop long-term health complications afterwards. So it's an easy study to do. The CDC has access to the Vaccine Safety Data Link, and this links everyone's medical records. And they do studies using that VSD data set all the time for all types of other things. But they've never really data mined it, which would take, a couple IT people, probably a couple weeks to just plug in some algorithms. They've never done it for vaxxed, unvaxxed for total health outcomes. You know who has, though? Paul Thomas. Dr. Paul Thomas, pediatrician. I believe he just retired, unfortunately, in Portland, Oregon. And he said, I have people in my practice. I have enough people in my practice that I could probably run a study like that. So he commissioned a study. It wasn't him just picking things. He actually brought statisticians in to commission this study.
The Vaccine Friendly Plan book published in 2016, that put the target on me. The medical board starts coming after me. In 2019, I get a letter from the Oregon Medical Board, prove that the Vaccine Friendly Plan is as safe as the CDC schedule. I mean, the CDC's never done a single study looking at health outcomes of their entire schedule. To this date, it's never been done. But they wanted me to do this. So I thought, well, I can do a quality assurance analysis of every patient born into my practice and look at all health outcomes. Let's see what happens. Because I knew within my practice I had hundreds of families that were choosing not to vaccinate. I had thousands of children who were variably vaccinated. So it was a massive data set. Why not look at it? Thank you, Medical Board, for asking me to do this. That was published in November of 2020. And 5 days after that publication was available online, I get a call from my attorney. The Oregon Medical Board has emergently suspended your license. Now, that wasn't a coincidence. I gave them the information they wanted, except they didn't want the information that they got. They had a long list of bogus complaints. I mean, as ridiculous as accusing me of causing a young child who was 11 years old or so at the time, who almost died from tetanus. He wasn't a patient of mine. He got tetanus, ended up hospitalized for 4 months in intensive care, and upon discharge, the only way he could get out of the hospital was to have a pediatrician. No one would take him because that family doesn't want to vaccinate. They still hadn't vaccinated. I accepted him. I take all comers and try to give him the best care I can. I was basically, the way they wrote up that complaint, his tetanus was my fault. I didn't even know him. Nonsense like that. Anyway, the study we published in the International Journal of Public Health was powerful. Ty, we had, I think it was 560 some unvaccinated children, almost 3,000 variably vaccinated, and we age matched the unvaxxed to the vaccinated and looked at all health outcomes. What we found was for every single health outcome, whether it was neurodevelopmental things like developmental delays, ADD, ADHD, even autism, all the allergies, eczema, and infections. This was the other thing. Those who are unvaccinated had so little infection of any kind, which sort of shatters that narrative. Well, you need to get your vaccines to protect others against infection. Well, it turns out from our data that was very significant. Those who were unvaccinated were actually providing the greatest protection to the community because they don't get sick. It was fascinating.
The proof that this study was alarming to the powers that be is that as soon as the data was handed over, when it was requested by our health agencies, and they were able to determine that, in fact, exactly what was shown to be true was true, they conducted a coordinated effort to de-license and de-practice Dr. Paul Thomas, who is truly one of the heroes of our movement.
When you start seeing a whole collection of completely unvaccinated children and how healthy they are, and they are not on chronic daily medications, they don't have chronic ear infections, they barely miss school, they're bright, inquisitive, you can see the difference between the unvaccinated children and the children that have been pummeled by these shots.
According to the CDC, 6 out of 10 people are suffering a lifelong debilitating chronic illness. 4 out of 10 are suffering 2 chronic illnesses, and 12% are suffering 5 or more chronic illnesses.
I think you have to take into context what other exposure does the person have to some of these toxic substances in addition to the vaccine that they're receiving. And what if they're receiving multiple vaccines at one time? No one has really looked at the effects of receiving 8 or 9 vaccines, which is commonly done in the United States on a single at a single visit. and no one's looked at that. What do all those toxic substances add up to when summated?
Most adults, if you walked into the doctor's office and the doctor said, well, we're going to give you 8 vaccines today. I mean, most of the time, the response would be, well, wait a minute, wait, 8? You're going to give me 8 shots, like all at the same, why? What makes you think I'm going to run into all of these pathogens at the same time that I need to be protected against? You know, I don't even get the flu. Don't even talk to me about that. I'm not a smoker. I don't need that pneumonia shot. And you would go through that whole thing and say, I don't want to get 8 shots today. Why is it okay for parents, or why do they not question and say, why is it you are injecting my baby, you're skewering my baby with 8 shots today to inject them with foreign matter all at the same time, and you're not one bit concerned about the interactions of what's in those vials coming together? And the nurse would generally say, well, that's why we give them in different limbs. We give one in each leg and one in each arm. We give one in the behind.
Our general approach to immunizations is that they can be given at the same time in different limbs.
But wait a minute. All that stuff's injecting into the same body. It's all going to slosh around together. It doesn't really matter if you gave it into different extremities. There's like no thinking about this. There's no critical thinking by anybody, including the parents, including the nurses, definitely not the doctors, of saying, wait, there's something not right here. We're not going to do 8 of these at the same time. We're not even going to do 4 of these at the same time. Oh, and now what the pediatrician or what the pharmaceutical industry does is said, oh, parents are kind of onto that. They don't want to give five shots to their baby at the same time. We'll take all 5 of those vaccines and we'll mix them together into one shot, so that baby only gets 1 jab, and tell the parent, oh, they're only getting 1 vaccine today, except in that vaccine is hepatitis B, DPT, polio in that 1 shot. That's called Pediarix.
Pediarix. This is a 5-in-1 combo vaccine. Diphtheria, tetanus, acellular pertussis, hepatitis B, and inactivated polio. On the Pediarix package insert, we noticed that all of the tests were groups that took Pediarix against those that took another vaccine. In other words, these were not true placebo tests.
We also noticed on page 8 of the package insert that there were 5 infant deaths reported. They attributed the deaths to SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome.
On cdc.gov, the headline reads, quote, vaccines have not been shown to cause sudden infant death syndrome, or SIDS. Then, immediately following the headline, here's what they say, quote, babies receive many vaccines when they are between 2 to 4 months old. This age range is also the peak age for sudden infant death syndrome, or SIDS. The timing of the 2-month and 4-month shots and SIDS has led some people to question whether they might be related. However, studies have found that vaccines do not cause and are not linked to SIDS. End quote.
I wonder what studies they're referring to, because they do not cite any studies on the website.
Apparently, the CDC is not familiar with the 2011 study published in Statistics in Medicine that reviewed 300 unexplained, sudden, unexpected deaths in babies. And here's what they found. They found a, quote, 16-fold risk increase after the 4th dose of a quadrivalent vaccine could be detected with at least 90% accuracy.
In layman's terms, the babies that had at least 4 doses of the quadrivalent vaccine, which is 4 vaccines in 1 shot, had a 16 times greater risk of dying. So how can the CDC honestly say that vaccines are not linked to SIDS?
The obvious answer to that question is that they are not being honest. In the last episode, we examined the polio vaccine, which is one of the 5 vaccines contained in Pediarix. Now, let's take a look at hepatitis B. According to the CDC's excipient list on cdc.gov, the Recombavax hepatitis B vaccine contains aluminum and formaldehyde.
And how about formaldehyde, embalming fluid? Are we trying to embalm people before their bodies have passed away? Preserve them for what end? Not for life-sustaining metabolic functions, but to stop them. And all of these things are known, in fact, also to contribute to cancer, like formaldehyde as a carcinogen.
Formaldehyde is rapidly broken down when we eat it, but it can remain in its whole form when injected. According to the American Cancer Society, formaldehyde has been associated with the types of cancer most common among children, such as leukemia. Why do we inject infants with formaldehyde?
The most deadly toxic thing that's ever happened to humanity is the introduction of the hepatitis B vaccine at birth. When that first got introduced into the schedule in 1991, and when I read the first 19-page paper on why they did this, the reason they introduced the hepatitis B vaccine in America at birth was because hepatitis B was endemic in mothers in Southeast Asia. I had to read that 3 times. Like, what? Hepatitis B is common in pregnant women in Southeast Asia, not common at all in most pregnant women in the United States, and we can screen for hepatitis B while pregnant to know whether or not your child is going to be exposed to that, but that's the reason we started giving it to newborns. A few years later, Congress held a hearing and saying, show us your data on the safety of giving 1-day-old infants a hepatitis B vaccine that has 100 micrograms of aluminum in it. Why are we doing this? Do you have the data? And the manufacturer said, oh, well, we don't have any data on that. We tested this shot on 5 to 10-year-old kids.
Babies shouldn't be having sex and shouldn't be doing IV drugs. All right, in no case, 0 cases, right? Therefore, this vaccine is asinine to be given to a newborn baby.
I don't understand why we started giving it to newborns, and I think that was back in the 90s that we started that. Newborns don't need it. Hepatitis B is a bloodborne infection. It's transmitted via bloodborne risk or sexual transmission. So the thought is, I think, well, we're going to give it to babies because they're going to get sexually active, when they become teenagers or, whenever later on in life. But there's no reason to give it to babies. I mean, I'd say wait. If you're going to take it, wait for later. But why are we giving it to babies in the nursery? I mean, that's when they're starting it, right after birth. And I don't see a reason for that.
If you're a parent and you've got a newborn, day 1, when you walk into a hospital in America, in the United States of America, it is standing orders for your baby to get the hepatitis B and the vitamin K shot. Let's talk about hepatitis B. This is a sexually transmitted disease. You catch it from sex. You can also get it from IV drug use, sharing dirty needles. Period. That's it. Do babies have sex? Share dirty needles? Absolutely not. Their risk is 0. I can recommend to you, and I'm not even practicing anymore. I'm a retired pediatrician, so I'm not giving medical advice. I'm just giving you science. There is 0 risk for your newborn unless birth mother, if you're the birth mother and you have active hepatitis B, yes, there's a 50% chance your baby could get it. Sure, in that instance, go ahead and get the jab, get the vaccine for Hep B and get the immune globulin also. But 99+% of moms in America are hepatitis B negative. They do not have hepatitis B, and your baby does not need that vaccine.
There's no need to give a hepatitis B vaccine to a 2-year-old child unless the mother's an active IV drug abusing mother. Those challenges in life, hepatitis B challenge could come in adult life, largely as a healthcare worker.
There's also a nurse whistleblower I had reported on years ago that was talking about the NICU unit. She was in the neonatal intensive care units, and they knew that with these premature babies, when they were giving them this Hep B vaccine, they would get the crash carts ready because it would affect their cardiovascular and their respiratory, their breathing and their heart.
When you introduce that shot on the first day of life, you will never know what kind of epigenetic disease you set up according to susceptibility to what's in your background, because you changed your immune system forever. So that's a lot more diabolical than give it to babies because you can't sell it. And in fact, in Ventura, California, nurses went 2 by 2, and they were forced, like in the Nazis, yes, and they were forced, even if the parents said no and signed off on to not give that shot at birth, they gave it to them anyway, and if one kept quiet, the other lost their job. And I met one such nurse after our book Plague came out. So the gift in all of this is that we're talking to each other and we can forgive each other. And she was a nurse and she was Parkinsonian, shaking. It's bad, it's sad. And she said, I never injected a baby, but I didn't say anything either. Silence equals death. And she said, and I'm paying for it. But she told me as soon as our book came out in 2014, we were at the library and she came from that St. John's Hospital, and we've got it on record. We know that they disobeyed the laws and they are targeting certain children. St. John's in Oxnard is not a very wealthy area of Oxnard, so it's the vulnerable, it's the blacks, it's the Hispanics, it's the people who have to work for a living. This really is a crime against humanity.
Those are strong words from Dr. Mikovits. A crime against humanity. But sometimes the truth is hard to swallow, and we agree with her. Targeting minorities, going against parents' wishes, and forcing the hepatitis B vaccine on every newborn, potentially setting them up for lifelong immune issues, is a crime against humanity.
Here's a commercial put out by Bill Gates, Gavi, Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunizations, which is a public-private global health partnership with the goal of increasing access to immunization in poor countries. This commercial is clearly targeting minorities.
Why should you take the hepatitis B vaccine? Hepatitis B is 100 times more infectious than HIV and is responsible for over 800,000 deaths globally each year. Hepatitis B is a liver infection caused by a virus spread through bodily fluids. It is often referred to as the silent killer because infection can go undetected for years before symptoms appear. Some people who catch it are only ill for a few weeks, with symptoms such as yellow eyes and skin, nausea, vomiting, and extreme tiredness. But others will develop liver failure, or even a form of liver cancer, both of which are fatal. The good news is there's a safe and effective vaccine. All children should receive the vaccine as soon as possible after birth, followed by a further 2 or 3 doses at least 4 weeks apart. The vaccine has already saved millions of lives around the world, so make sure your loved ones are protected.
Wow, talk about fear and coercion. All children should receive the vaccine as soon as possible after birth, apparently according to this commercial, because they might develop fatal liver cancer or liver failure. But the key facts are what they fail to tell you. They don't tell you that the global incidence of hepatitis B in women is about 3%. So approximately 97% of children do not need this vaccine.
In the propaganda commercial, they also state that the good news is there's a safe and effective vaccine. But is this true? Has the hepatitis B vaccine ever been adequately tested for safety?
The hepatitis B vaccine is based on the CDC's bird in a hand theory. Well, if we can inject them in the first day of life, then it doesn't matter if they're, if they're susceptible to hepatitis B or not. We'll just vaccinate everybody. And by the way, that will create a market for hepatitis B manufacturers. Not to mention that the clinical trials for the hepatitis B vaccine actually followed the infants for only 4 days after they were vaccinated for adverse events. So if an individual died 5 days after the vaccine, then they, according to the clinical trial, they did not have an adverse event. It's just ridiculous.
Merck's vaccine was tested for 5 days. They looked for the solicited adverse events. GlaxoSmithKline's was 4 days. So that's your safety window that you're dealing with when you're thinking about getting that's what it was licensed based upon. Now they'll tell you, oh, we do post-licensure data. Okay, but that is what the doctors, the infinite wisdom of the CDC, the FDA, that is the information that they had in their hands to license this vaccine, 4 and 5 days respectively.
There is a study where the hepatitis B vaccine was only tested for 5 days. Basically, they were looking for an acute reaction, like we talked about, swelling of the arm or flu-like symptoms. That is only the initial reaction. In my opinion, any vaccine that has been tested for 5 days, I've heard cases where sometimes they're studied for 3 days, is absolutely unacceptable.
They play certain tricks with vaccine research. One of the just ridiculous tricks is that they make the studies so short that you'll never see any problems. Hepatitis B trials were 5 days. 5 days, folks. You're going to inject this massive dose of aluminum that's known to cause autoimmune problems that take months or years to develop, but you're only going to look for side effects for 5 days. And I'm sure if somebody did die in those 5 days, it would be deemed a coincidence. So we basically have no safety testing. So a huge, strong please, no Hep B for newborns.
We said no to the hepatitis B vaccine. When we lived in Panama, Central America, our youngest child, Charity, was born. After she was a few days old, we went down to the local registrar to apply for her Panamanian birth certificate. They told us that we needed to show proof that she had been injected with the hepatitis B vaccine before they could issue her birth certificate.
Eventually, with the help of our Panamanian doctor, we convinced them to give us a birth certificate for Charity, which enabled us to obtain her U.S. passport and eventually leave the country.
People have been taught to just listen and do as they're told, what the doctor says, what the hospital tells, and better than I, with those birth plans, that it is so difficult. I have people contact me all the time, and so they then say, look, we want to opt out. And they make them sign everything and warn them and scare them when they're just trying to have their baby, if they're going to do it at the hospital. Even if the midwife is there, now they're scared to intervene if they have a midwife or doula. And but they have to feel like they're signing their life away, like, God, oh, what could happen? Like your baby is going to get an STD. I mean, it's just another one of the schemes from pharmaceutical, in my opinion.
These hepatitis B vaccines pose an extreme threat to the health of children because some of them contain enormous quantities of aluminum, a toxic element. The aluminum is there to actually cause inflammation in the child, to provoke an immune response, but it also causes inflammation throughout the body. It could cause neurological inflammation or cardiovascular inflammation, immune system overreaction, which can lead to autoimmune disorders. It's a form of immune system inflammation. Now, 250 micrograms of a toxic element, aluminum, it's not a fatal dose necessarily, but it can be a very harmful dose. And the thing we need to understand is that different children have different efficiencies in their ability to remove aluminum from their bodies. In some children, they can remove it very quickly, very efficiently, and it may not pose much of a risk of harm to those children because they get it out of their bodies quickly. But in other children, that aluminum may take weeks to be eliminated or even months. They may be predisposed to retaining aluminum so that toxic element continues to cause damage in their body every second, every hour of every day, while it's circulating throughout their neurological system, their cardiovascular system, affecting brain, affecting lungs, affecting their immune system, all of it, even affecting fertility.
The hepatitis B vaccine has 250 micrograms of aluminum. The FDA has had in place a standing document. It's hard to find, but it's still there. You should not exceed 5 micrograms per kilogram per day of aluminum. So let's say a really big baby, a 10-pounder, weighs about 4 kilos. 4 times 5 is 20 micrograms. You're going to inject 250 micrograms into your newborn. That's over 10 times the toxic dose. And aluminum lasts in the body for a half-life of up to 7 years. And if it was just the Hep B that had aluminum, okay, that'd be terrible, but it's so many others. The DTaP that you're going to give it 2, 4, 6, 18 months. The Prevnar that you're going to give it 2, 4, 6, and 12 months. And then the Hep B. I mean, it's a massive dose of aluminum. So absolute no on Hep B.
According to the FDA, the maximum allowable dose of injected aluminum is 5 micrograms per kilogram. So doing some math and following the 5 micrograms per kilogram maximum allowable dose of aluminum, the following are examples of weight with their corresponding maximum levels of aluminum per the FDA. An 8-pound baby, 18.16 micrograms of aluminum. A 15-pound baby, approximately 34 micrograms. A 30-pound toddler, about 68 micrograms of aluminum. A 50-pound child, 113 micrograms of aluminum. A 150-pound adult, about 340 micrograms of aluminum, and a 350-pound adult is allowed 794 micrograms of aluminum.
So exactly how much aluminum is in the vaccine that are routinely given to children?
One version of the Hib vaccine has 225 micrograms in one shot. The Hep B, 250 micrograms. The DTaP, depending upon the manufacturer, ranges from 170 to 625 micrograms. The pneumococcus, 125 micrograms. Hepatitis A, 250 micrograms. HPV, 225. Penicillin, which is the DTaP, Hib, and polio combo, 330 micrograms. And the Pediarix, which we just talked about, 850 micrograms of aluminum.
At birth, over 99% of children in the USA are given the hepatitis B vaccination. If the baby is typical size, let's just say that he or she weighs 8 pounds. The amount of aluminum in the Hep B vaccine alone is almost 14 times the amount of aluminum that is allowed by the FDA.
In addition, at well child checkups, it's common for 2, 4, and 6-month appointments to include up to 8 vaccinations that add up to more than 1,000 micrograms of aluminum. According to the FDA limits, that amount isn't even safe for a 350-pound adult, much less a tiny baby.
The dogma from the CDC is that vaccines do not cause autism. But are you aware of the fact that one of the most definitive studies connecting vaccines and autism was on the hepatitis B vaccine, and it happened within a decade of the 1986 Vaccine Act and the pursuing ramp-up in the CDC's vaccination schedule?
Autism is not diagnosed for typically 4.2 years. By 1995, we started seeing this explosion in autism. And then in 1999, because the CDC itself was worried that the vaccines may be causing autism, and the mercury, particularly in the vaccine, or the other metals, they decided to do a study, and they retained a Belgian researcher named Thomas Verstraeten, who studied the biggest database available to the CDC, the Vaccine Safety Data Link, which are the vaccination records and the health claims of the top 10 HMOs. So I think there's 10 million people in that database. And when Verstraeten, he looked at several 100,000 children, and he compared children who had gotten the hepatitis B vaccine on time with children who had not gotten it on time or had not gotten it at all. And he found an 11.35 relative risk. That means an 1,135% greater elevated risk of getting an autism diagnosis if you got that vaccine in the first 30 days. And they knew right then what was causing the autism epidemic. The relative risk for smoking cigarettes for 20 years, a pack a day, and lung cancer is 10. This was 11.35. The relative risk of 2 is considered proof of causation. So this was 11.35. They knew what was happening at that point, and they had a panicked, DEFCON 1 call out to alarm that was sent out to all the major vaccine proponents in the university system, the vaccine companies, and the big regulatory agencies, WHO, NIH, CDC, FDA, etc. And they all met in a secret meeting at a Methodist retreat center in Norcross, Georgia, called Simpsonwood. And they met for 2 days. And the first day they had these alarmed revelations where they talked about the study and said to each other, this is bulletproof, there's no way to argue with this, and we are in deep trouble. And attorneys are going to come after us, the predatory bar, we're all going to be in trouble. Then the second day of Simpson, where they talk about how let's not let this get out, we're going to embargo and collect all the copies, and we're going to launch some studies to prove that there is no link. And I obtain the transcript of those. You can look at those transcripts, Children's Health Defense website. They're called Simpsonwood, and make up your own mind about it.
Parents should be allowed to make up their own mind based upon the studies, and they should be able to say yes or no to the hepatitis B vaccine without fear or coercion.
If the infant is at risk for hepatitis B, there are homeopathic remedies available.
Is that child just born, helpless, innocent little child, going to escape when no one's looking from the delivery room and get a tattoo with a dirty needle or engaged in very dangerous sexual practices? No, it's absurd. So why Hep B across the board? Again, is it profitability? Is it profit over science and genuine protection? Should there be a concern for liver issues, there are homeopathic remedies that I would highly utilize and recommend, like Bryonia alba, Nux vomica, and Chelidonium, as well as other minerals that should be present in the mom giving birth, like selenium and chromium, and the facilitation of normal healthy minerals to prevent these issues from manifesting.
Write those down. Bryonia alba, Chelidonium, Nux vomica, selenium, chromium. Worth the price of admission, right? That's why we created Remedy, because you deserve the truth and you deserve the answers and solutions. You deserve the remedies that the censorship industrial complex does not want you to know.
We know that all of you have friends and family that need this information. That's why when you choose to own the Hero package of Remedy, we're going to give you 5 additional thumb drives or DVDs, your choice, absolutely free. So you can give them the entire docuseries.
Yes, we're going to send you 5 extra sets of all 8 episodes to give to family and friends, absolutely free. The freedom-hating tyrants and the censors that want to silence all of us, they absolutely cannot stop you from giving away free DVDs and thumb drives to your friends and family.
Just click the button below to take advantage of this special offer. Thanks in advance for your support. We couldn't do this without you.
For the next few minutes, we're going to examine the chickenpox, or varicella, and the shingles, herpes zoster vaccines. Varicella is an infectious disease caused by the varicella zoster virus. The main chickenpox vaccine is called Varivax, and it's a live virus vaccine. Here's Dr. Sherry Tenpenny.
The chickenpox vaccine is a complete enigma. Of why they even developed it in the first place. That when you read the original articles that came out, that vaccine was released in 1995. And when you read it, it was literally for mommy convenience. Because by 1995, most families were 2-income families and both parents were working. And if a child came down with chickenpox, they would be sick for 7 to 10 days and then, of course, have a lifetime of immunity. And we certainly couldn't have all of those moms or dads missing a week worth of work with staying home with their child, their 7 to 9-year-old child that had an itchy rash. So if we could just create this vaccine, which is made from cells of aborted fetal tissues and live viruses, to inject into these children to keep them from getting a week's worth of vesicular itchy rashes, well, then moms and dads wouldn't have to miss work.
There are a couple of problems with the varicella vaccines. Number one is breakthrough infections, but also the attenuated virus vaccines have a documented history of shedding. So when some outbreaks occurred, they have been identified as attenuated virus vaccine strains, and that's problematic.
If you read the insert of the chickenpox vaccine, varicella, it tells you, it warns you, do not be around other people because you may shed this vaccine onto other people and give them chickenpox. It's an admission that the people being administered this varicella vaccine are a danger to others around them. It's a known risk or side effect of the vaccine.
According to the Varivax package insert, they monitored the recipients for 42 days, which is not nearly long enough to establish safety, especially in a live virus vaccine.
And Mike Adams was correct. The package insert does state, quote, vaccine recipients should avoid close contact with high-risk individuals susceptible to varicella due to possible risk of transmission, also called shedding. But that's not the only problem with this vaccine.
And chickenpox vaccines contain cloned cells of aborted human fetal tissue, which means that if you inject children with chickenpox vaccines, you're injecting those children with the cloned tissue, the blood, if you will, of other dead children. Because these ingredients, WI38, MRC5, were taken from an aborted human baby. A murdered human being, the blood of a child was taken and then cloned to make ingredients for vaccines that are injected into other children. This is medical cannibalism. They murder some children, take their tissue and blood, and make a vaccine out of it and inject it into other children that then causes them to become infectious and a danger to the people around them. This is how you cause pandemics. This is how you cause human suffering.
There are approximately 4 million live births per year in the United States. It's when do we decide it is not worth giving all 4 million of those kids 2 doses of a chickenpox vaccine to prevent an infection that doesn't exist anymore, like the polio infection that doesn't exist in the United States. When do we decide that the end point is such that we don't need to do this anymore? This is the place where parents really need to get educated and understand what is not necessary for their child. I would say none of the shots are necessary, but there are certainly ones that are absolutely not necessary, and the chickenpox vaccine is one of them.
There are cases where the chickenpox vaccine has been fatal. About a decade ago was reported the first case of fatal varicella due to a vaccine strain reported from the United States.
What about shingles, which is a very painful rash? Is there a link between the vaccine and shingles?
There's been really good work by Dr. Gary Goldman regarding the regarding the varicella vaccine and shingles that shows a definitive statistically significant connection. There's definitely been an uptick in shingles, and you see even the commercials that are, we have pharmaceutical commercials in the United States. We're one of the only countries that allows pharmaceutical advertising on television, us in New Zealand. And so, what is told to us by these pharmaceutical commercials is that if you had chickenpox, then the virus that causes shingles is still in your body. But what they don't tell you is if you've had the chickenpox vaccine, the same thing holds true. You still have varicella in your body, and that can cause shingles later on in life. And there have been studies that have shown that children that receive the chickenpox vaccine actually get shingles earlier in life.
Another thing that's fascinating about the varicella vaccine, shingles was never found really in children. Only after they introduced the varicella shot, the so-called chickenpox shot, did they start seeing shingles manifest in young people, which used to be considered something that would only manifest in old people that had chickenpox at some time, and then they came up with a varicella version of the vaccine for shingles, a shingle shot, Shingrix, for instance. And this is manifesting as more shingles, not less, because again, the corruption of the immune response via injection is not the same thing in terms of prevention as homeoprophylaxis, where we can take the thing that they associated with shingles manifestation later in life or chickenpox in childhood and safely sensitize the immune system without actually weakening it or destroying it and causing the very manifestation of the thing that you say you're going to prevent via the injection.
Here's one of those commercials that Dr. Hooker and Robert Scott Bell were referring to.
My husband and I have never been more active.
Shingles doesn't care.
I go to spin classes with my coworkers.
Good for you. Shingles doesn't care. Because no matter how healthy you feel, your risk of shingles sharply increases after age 50. But Shingrix protects. Proven over 90% effective. Shingrix is a vaccine used to prevent shingles in adults 50 years and older. Shingrix does not protect everyone and is not for those with severe allergic reactions to its ingredients or to a previous dose. An increased risk of Guillain-Barré syndrome was observed after getting Shingrix. Fainting can also happen. The most common side effects are pain, redness and swelling at the injection site, muscle pain, tiredness, headache, shivering, fever, and upset stomach. Shingles doesn't care, but Shingrix protects. Ask your doctor or pharmacist about Shingrix.
Apparently, shingles doesn't care and Shingrix protects. But is this true?
Here's more on shingles from Dr. Tim Penny and Dr. Mikovits.
If at some point in time you had wild chickenpox infection, that infection lays dormant in your body until some point in time in the future when your immune system has become weak, either by chemotherapy or by diabetes or by immune system, like things like steroids that you would be taking for a rash or something like that. And then the virus becomes reactivated, infects a nerve that goes along a tract called a dermatome and causes a very, very painful itchy rash. That's what shingles is. The shingles vaccine is designed to keep that virus in check, except it doesn't. In fact, in 50-year-olds who get a shingles shot, you've got about a 30% chance of contracting shingles from that shot. It has 9 times more live viruses in the shingles shot than what the chickenpox shot does, and it's a similar virus. And by the time you get to be 80, if you get a shingles shot, you have no benefit from it at all, and you're more likely to contract shingles from the shingles shot.
So the shingles shot causes shingles. And so it was it's in our book Plague. It was one of the first things I saw when I first went up in Incline Village and started meeting with the patients and the families. I'm sitting here and there's a 13-year-old and a 17-year-old with shingles. That's only old people under stress. My grandmother got shingles when she was 90, and now it's lower and lower ages. Think about cancer, lower and lower ages. So the shingles shot causes shingles or a pathogenic priming event, so that you just literally break out in these things. So when you're looking at teenagers with shingles, he said, "Oh, don't be ridiculous, they'd be AIDS patients." And I said, "Yeah, that's what I was thinking." And what do I mean by AIDS? Acquired immune deficiency or dysfunction. You acquired it. It's not according to nature. It came from the shots.
According to Dr. Mikovits and Dr. Tenpenny, the shingles shot actually causes shingles and can even cause AIDS, according to Dr. Mikovits, who knows more about AIDS than any other scientist that we know. But there are natural remedies to keep these viruses in check.
But what you can do instead is high-dose vitamin C, take out white sugar and white flour out of your diet, do things to increase your immune system, shut down inflammation with things like turmeric, to make yourself be more healthy overall and to keep any other virus in check. Which brings up another point, is that by now we've been using this chickenpox vaccine for almost 20 years. It came out in 1995. We've got an entire generation of children who never had chickenpox. So they're not going to have a dormant virus laying in their system that might reactivate later and cause shingles. So when do we define the endpoint that we no longer need a chickenpox vaccine, and we're not going to need that shingles vaccine either?
Another shot we really don't need is the COVID-19 injection, which was rolled out after the ridiculous mask mandate and absurdly inaccurate PCR tests. It was all one big fat scam, guys.
I personally spoke to a doctor who was a chief pediatric immunologist to figure out what was really going on. And I quickly uncovered that this was really just a scam to hurt our children. Our children were not dying from COVID, but these masks were emotionally scarring them. I could see it right away. You could see the OCD that was being formed. You can see the anxiety that these kids were experiencing. And so I went out there and did what other leaders, especially protecting children, should have done. I said, no, I'm not doing this. I'm not mandating these masks. I'm not forcing these kids to be 6 feet apart. I'm not socially distancing these kids. And I was willing to do it at all costs. I mean, there were gym owners in Florida at the time who were being arrested for not mandating masks. And I told my husband, look, I have one person to answer to, and that's God. And so I put my foot down.
They can manipulate that PCR test. As you know, they have cycles. And if you increase the cycles, which they did, you could literally call a pandemic or an outbreak anywhere, anytime, anyhow, with the flip of the button. Just let's turn the cycles up a bit, and it'll make an ant into Godzilla. And so, for people to understand that, and that's why they only had the one approved test. There were lots of other ones out there. These people that are in charge, they have some answering to do, especially Anthony Fauci.
Fauci is a criminal. Our good friend Bobby Kennedy wrote an amazing book. It's called The Real Anthony Fauci, which you should read if you doubt that. And COVID-19 was a giant experiment, as was the rollout of the COVID injections.
This entire COVID-19 movement's been an experiment globally, but even our government facilitated the experiment and have been experimenting on you this whole time. They just experimented on almost half of the United States American public by actually forcing them, bribing them, or threatening them to get the COVID-19 vaccines, which was an experimental drug and product. It's still only underneath an emergency use authorization, never approved and found safe and effective by the FDA. That has never happened. Still hasn't happened.
In my experience, one of the things you can pretty much count on is that chemicals are bad for the human body. Whether you get them through injection, and these injections are horrible and the medicines are horrible. Every one of them breaks down your immune system, even if it helps you, even if it temporarily helps whatever your symptom is for the day, you're depleting your immune system as a result. And there's also, there's stuff on the outside. There's plutonium floating around in the planet, for goodness sakes, and there's all kinds of environmental things that can contribute to that chemical infection, if you will. But none worse than the vaccines and the meds, because they're fast-tracked.
So what happened with COVID, which really opened my eyes, was they incentivized hospitalizing someone with COVID. You got paid extra. Then you get paid a lot more if you put them in the ICU. You get paid even more if you intubate the person, and then you get an extra bonus if they're dead. So you were incentivized to keep people away while they were less ill when we could have done something for them. And you remember that people were told, stay home, only go to the hospital if you can't breathe. Well, that way, by the time you get to the hospital, you can't breathe. It's too late really to do much about it. Your lungs are overwhelmed. You have to intubate. And then they had this protocol of sedation and remdesivir, which it was way too late to be giving remdesivir. It was worthless at that point, but remdesivir does shut down your kidneys very effectively. So you intubate them, you sedate them so they can't let you know what they need, and then you shut down their kidneys. So we just basically killed off mostly our elderly. Very tragic. When you're suffering, whether you end up dying or not, what we need when we're in actual physical pain, even emotional pain for that matter, we need human contact. We need physical contact with our loved ones, even a pet. I mean, we need that physical contact and to be with our loved ones. And what they did was criminal. I mean, just whisking people away, isolating them, and then they would die alone. I just can't imagine anything worse.
Remdesivir is not just a waste of money, it's dangerous, and I don't know why we use it. It's not very effective, but people use it left and right and swear by it, even though we know that it can cause significant complications like renal failure and other things without much efficiency or efficacy. But yeah, and I was prescribing all these other things, and so were a lot of other people, and people were being threatened, people were having their licenses pulled, people were being canceled for using things like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine and zinc and vitamin C and vitamin D, and recommending those things to patients. But we know, there's a huge host of information on the efficacy of those things, and they're safe. They're not drugs that are going to hurt you or kill you like remdesivir might.
Look at the war on ivermectin. Ivermectin was essentially defamed and slandered and deplatformed, you could say, attacked by the medical journals. Why? Because it worked and it's off patent. The drug companies and the vaccine manufacturers can't make a lot of money off of ivermectin. And they also can't inject people with a depopulation bioweapon if people cure their COVID with ivermectin, which can be purchased over the counter for agricultural use, by the way. So it's very clear that the establishment, the medical establishment, science establishment, big tech, big government, big pharma, they are at war against the things that work. They don't want people to be healthy. They don't want to treat, prevent, or cure any disease, or certainly any pandemic. They want people to suffer and die. They want to exploit that pain and suffering for corporate profits and government power. They want to be able to lock you down by causing a pandemic emergency that their own injections actually amplify.
If there were other effective treatments, it would have been illegal to offset liability under the emergency use authorization. You could not get that because there were alternative effective treatments. They had to deny the effectiveness of hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin. They had to actively deny that in order to maintain that liability protection under the emergency use authorization.
Was this deliberate? In my own humble opinion, yes, it was deliberate. Because there's no way that you will want to remove therapeutic medicines that could have saved millions of lives. There's no way that you would restrict those medicines. There's no way that you would censor me as a Black woman after coming out saying that Black people was disproportionately affected by this quote unquote virus. You wouldn't stop me from talking and having open dialogue to see how can I better assist with my health so that I can save my life. They censored my sister and I, is what they did, to keep us from having a conversation about it. And now that she's dead and gone on, I have to be here to carry that torch to help save America, because that's the hill she died on, wanting to save America.
Fauci and Big Pharma know that in order to maintain their emergency use authorization, which drives the vaccine, they had to remove any possibility of there being any other therapeutics. For example, zinc or ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine or vitamin D3 or any of the other related things that we can get in, iodine, for example. All these are great things you could do. They had to make sure that none of those things actually came to the light of day, or else they would lose their EAU. And so that authorization got into place so that they could drive their vaccine or injection agenda. It's not really a vaccine. I call it a quacksine, because this is total quackery.
There's so much sleight of hand in all this. So when these pharmaceutical companies want to get a product out in record time, they call it a vaccine. They can't have the vaccine if there's any medication, any workable thing that a person can use. It's by law. And so that's why they shot down hydrochloroquine and ivermectin. They were successful, safe drugs. I would do it differently. I would do vitamin C, I'd do vitamin D, I'd do some zinc. I would pursue entirely a holistic realm, only supporting the immune system. But they had 2 medical treatments readily available. They'd been on the market for over 30 years each, safe and effective. And they had to shoot that. They had to squelch that in order to get a vaccine passed. Otherwise, there would be no emergency use authorization, period. That would be illegal. So they create a vaccine that isn't a vaccine, and they label it a vaccine to avoid testing, to avoid liability. Then they go, this other sleight of hand there that I just mentioned. I mean, what a program. It's a genius plan. It's an evil genius plan, but it's well in place.
We are dealing with an evil cartel of power between big corporations, big government, big pharma, big tech, and big media. And they are colluding in an actual conspiracy to keep people sick, to profit from suffering and disease and death, and to deprive people of access to the things that actually work.
You can be sure that right now they are doing everything they can to block congressional hearings about the origins of COVID-19 and the merits of alternative treatments and the benefits and risks of their vaccines. That is going on right now, I have no doubt.
Why would they be attempting to block hearings on the COVID-19 injections? It couldn't have anything to do with the thousands of people dropping dead across the globe, could it? Thousands of athletes who are in top physical shape, but they took the injection. They're dead.
I mean, look at all these young athletes just dropping dead. Look at the documentary, Died Suddenly. They had over 17 million views, and everyone's talking about it. You can't stop the truth. You can prolong it from coming out like they did by censoring all of us, but at the end of the day, it's out.
I think during my entire career of playing rugby, and I played rugby for a very long time in the UK, I knew of one friend of mine, one person in the entire sort of rugby network of the United Kingdom who died from a congenital cardiomyopathy. So he had a conduction defect. This was diagnosed very early on, and while in the middle of sport, he went into an arrhythmia and died. Now we see it all the time, and the common denominator is that it's cardiac, that it is associated with myocarditis or pericarditis or some kind of cardiac event, some serious cardiac event. And we now know that the COVID shots are associated with these events. This is one of their side effects.
Pfizer's post-clinical data, their post-market surveillance data, actually showed that within less than 3 months of the Pfizer vaccine rolling out, Pfizer had accounted for 1,233 deaths. So why wasn't it pulled from the market? Makes no sense.
As far as the died suddenly realities and the fact that all of these media outlets, as well as all of social media, have literally targeted and just shoved down the memory hole the millions of reports that have occurred is really, God, I have to say, criminal. It really is. The died suddenly cover up, if you will, is it does harken back in my imagination to what was happening in Germany, during the Nazis getting power. And the problem there is you can't say this. You use the word Nazi anywhere, you refer to history, and then suddenly you're deplatformed as anti-Semitic because you use the word Nazi. Even when Vera Shiraz, who's done an interview for my nonprofit, Stand for Health Freedom, has early on in the declared pandemic pointed out that this is exactly what happened when she was a child in Germany. What she's seeing now is exactly what was happening when the Nazis took power. And she went through the whole experience of the Holocaust. So this is a Holocaust survivor who's saying, listen, folks, you have to pay attention. But even then, you'd be tagged as anti-Semitic or harming the community if you even reference these facts.
Our own FDA and Pfizer, for them to want to hide their documents about how this stuff spread for 75 years from we, the American people, that should let you know that something is wrong here. There's a lot of people that's falling dead and they hadn't even made it to 60 years old. And they're passing away from a lot of different diseases like cancer, lung cancer, kidney disease, blood clots, pulmonary embolism. They're passing away, brain aneurysm. They're passing away from a lot of different things, and they're young. Heart attack. Why isn't anybody investigating that? Why aren't they investigating how there's been a rise in the number of sudden deaths? People doing good one day and then dead the next day. Now, about 5 or 10 minutes before my sister passed away, we were sitting there. She was happy. She was not sick. She was getting ready to do the show the next day. We was talking about going back out on tour, doing our book tour. I stepped out of the room for a few moments. When I came back in, she was on the phone talking to my younger sister, but she looked at it a little strange. I, told her to just hang up the phone from talking to my younger sister. And as soon as she hung up the phone, she said, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. So I helped her try to get to the back door so that we can open up the door to try to get some air in. And I sat there, and about 5 minutes later, I saw my sister take her last breath.
And if you can't speak honestly to those side effects, which are obviously not side effects, they're primary effects, and if you can't even point to the government databases that are designed to collect the side effect data without them calling you an enemy of the state, then we are living in beyond Orwellian times, right? That's really unfortunately where we are right now.
Large numbers of people are dying. We're seeing skyrocketing all-cause mortality across all the data systems. The most uncomfortable question to ask is, could mass COVID-19 vaccination be the cause of these excess deaths? The CDC in the United States holds the data. They hold the National Death Index of all the deaths in the United States, and they hold the Vaccine Administration Database. A merge needs to be done of those data, and we need to see those dying on day 0, 1, 2, and 3, and analyze whether or not there's a temporal relationship between all-cause mortality and vaccination. Our CDC will not take steps to evaluate the problem, let alone protect Americans from COVID-19 fatal vaccine injury syndromes. Cause of death is almost always known. Almost always known. Now we see large numbers of reports of deaths, cause unknown. I believe this giant new category of death that's occurred since mass vaccination Cause of death unknown. In fact, is due to the vaccine, since the vaccine causes fatal syndromes. Fatal myocarditis, intracranial hemorrhage and stroke, blood clots, pulmonary embolism, deep venous thrombosis, Guillain-Barré syndrome, VITT, vaccine-induced thrombotic thrombocytopenia, and multi-system inflammatory disorder. So since fatal vaccine injury syndromes are clearly documented and published in the peer-reviewed literature, and large numbers of people are dying suddenly, it's a chain of logic to say that the cause of this new category of death is most likely to be the COVID-19 vaccines until proven otherwise.
Dr. McCullough makes a great point. The cause of death should be assumed to be the COVID-19 injections until proven otherwise. But unfortunately, most medical doctors are completely oblivious and blind to the connection.
Most doctors are so unaware that we have a problem with our vaccines that they can't even think that what's right in front of them. In this case, we were talking about people dropping dead right in front of you. They cannot make the connection that there might be a link.
I'm also greatly concerned that doctors are unwilling to recognize and admit the vaccine is unsafe because they themselves have taken it. They psychologically can't come to grips that what we're seeing in our patients, heart damage, myocarditis, blood clots, stroke, intracranial hemorrhage, immune system abnormalities, they can't come to grips with the fact that they took this vaccine themselves and they've put themselves at risk. Therefore, doctors are willfully blind to COVID-19 vaccine injuries, disabilities, and deaths.
The way that these pharmaceutical companies are operating, they are murderers, is what they are. They are murderers. And what do you do to a murderer? You lock them up. You shut them down, you lock them up. And I believe that every last one of them that perpetrated this particular murderous injection on the American people, that knows about it, every last one of them can burn in hell. Every last one of them.
Silk speaks from her heart. She lost her sister, Diamond, and Big Pharma is responsible. She has a righteous anger, but there's no reason to lose hope. We have remedies.
For years and years, or 25 years probably at this point, I have been using a detox bath in all of my detox programs where a person takes 2 cups of Epsom salts, 2 cups of baking soda, and 2 cups of hydrogen peroxide, puts those in the bath and soaks for about half an hour. And that's been something we've done for kidney, as a kidney remedy to help detox what your kidneys would normally eliminate, but also to help with colds and flus. It's been very, very helpful. And we've found that in folks that have had bad reactions to these vaccines are finding some very good relief with these baths. I'm about doing things that will make us stronger so we can ward this stuff off. Okay? It's not about treating the disease or killing the virus or that kind of thing. It's about making me so strong that the virus has no effect, or very little effect, if any. Okay? So we take proteolytic enzymes, we take herbal anti-inflammatories, and we take fulvic acid before going out into public. You know, these are just the basic things that we do. We've always done that, though. That hasn't changed. You know, COVID-19 didn't bring that on. That's something we've always done. And it's always worked for us.
The use of the bioactive form of silver, I use the bioactive silver hydrosol. The ion itself, when you remove an electron on silver, you now have a positive charge, an electrical charge that is quite profound in neutralizing agents, whether they be bacterial or fungal, but also stopping viral issues. If you're concerned about that, the silver ion has the ability to bind and denature the protein capsid structure, if you will, of a virus, that's the coat, and it can penetrate that weakened coat and then bind to the DNA or RNA of that virus that has taken your genetic material, in any case rendering it unable to replicate. and in that case making it not possible to cause any issue or problem. Now, if we're talking about bacterial species, the ability to neutralize bacterial reproduction is legendary and not controversial as it comes to the silver ion or nanoparticles as they interact with bacterial species of any or all kind. They can also weaken the outer membrane that protects the integrity of a bacterial cell, causing it to rupture, or in the case of inadequate quantities of silver ions in that area, can penetrate that bacterial wall, if you will, and transit through the cytoplasm to the mitochondria of that bacterial cell, binding to the DNA of that cell, rendering it unable to reproduce. And this is also true of fungal species. So we already have a tool in the natural world brought in safely in the bioactive hydrosol technology at very low concentration to prevent the need for a vaccine even if it were to work.
There is no need for vaccines when we have remedies like silver hydrosol, detox baths, Epsom salts, baking soda, hydrogen peroxide, enzymes, and fulvic acid. Here's Dr. McCullough with what he calls a mental remedy.
In a sense, the mental remedy is to realize what's happened, become alarmed of what's transpired here. Have some degree of regret, remorse, having a sense that no more can happen. There can be no more administration of COVID-19 vaccination. That's got to stop. Anybody who's taken 1, 2, 3, or 4 shots, they have to understand the 5th shot could be fatal, and the toxicity is cumulative. The more shots that one takes, the sicker they become over time. So there can be no more shots. Everyone needs to understand that the remedy is to have the discernment, to, in a sense, have scales lifted off the eyes, have eyes to see, ears to hear, and understand fundamentally a mistake has been made. The human body has been defiled by a genetic vaccine. The code for the Wuhan Institute of Virology spike protein has been injected into millions, if not billions, of human beings. People must realize that that is an act of defiling God's creation. That is fundamentally wrong. It's causing great harm. The remedy is an awakening. The remedy is discernment. And the remedy is to have those who took the vaccine recognize their mistake and go out and warn others.
That's what we're doing now. We are warning others. And that's one of the remedies that they don't want you to utilize. They do not want you to share this information, so please share it everywhere.
The censorship industrial complex does not want you to know your options. They want to keep us all unaware and compliant and obedient. They want to keep us dependent on Big Pharma's vaccines and drugs. And that's why we created Remedy, because you deserve to know your options. You deserve the truth.
And the truth is, we outnumber them by a whole lot. And when you choose to own the Hero Package of Remedy, we're going to give you 5 additional thumb drives or DVDs. That will be your choice, absolutely free. So you can give them to everyone you love.
Indeed, we're going to send you 5 extra sets of all 8 episodes to give to your family and friends absolutely free. Just click the button below to take advantage of this special offer. Thanks in advance for your support. We couldn't do this without you.
You don't even have to confront anyone like we did during COVID-19 with all the mask Nazis running around trying to coerce you. Just give them a copy. You don't want to regret the fact that you never shared this with your friends and your family.
We've all bent a little bit. They tell us the 2 weeks just to kind of to flatten the curve a little bit. But we all gave up flying on airplanes. We decided we'd wear masks. Well, gosh, I don't want to speak out. I might lose my job. I might lose my reputation. Everybody has some sort of price. And, I think that knowledge is key, and getting yourself as well informed. You make your good choices, whether you speak out or not. In your own circle, you should speak out. I wish I had. I had some friends whose kids have been damaged by childhood vaccines since I became aware of them. And I say, wow, I've always said, do what you think's best. You do your own research. But now I feel bad that had I mentioned it, maybe my friends would have taken an extra look at it, and they wouldn't be dealing with children that were harmed. So I don't know that I can stay quiet anymore with what I know, and you know, whether anybody hears it or not, I'm not sure it matters, but I'm going to try to inform people what I know. They can do with it what they want.
You have to say no and stand up to them. The more you give them, the more you concede, the more they'll come at you. And it's a fact. And they tried really hard to get me to concede and say that I was wrong, and I refused. I brought Bobby Kennedy into my school to speak. And he spoke in January of 2021. And they were irate. Why are you bringing in him to speak only against the shots? I said, because you're getting the opposite all day long. I'm getting you something that you're not going to hear in mainstream media. So I'm trying to give you that other side that you're not getting, so that way you can make an informed decision. And I have so many teachers and parents to this day that come up to me and say, thank you. I would have never found that information if you didn't bring it to me. I mean, I have a very large percentage of my staff that thanks me not only for giving them that information, but once I, showed them the rabbit hole, then they went in deeper and deeper, and they stopped their parents from getting the shots. And they have aunts and uncles that have died from the shot. And they feel so grateful that they've saved their parents. And they're like, if you didn't present the other side, I would have encouraged my parents to get that shot.
We've been taught for most of our lives to be, good citizen, good student, good all these things, but it's, if you want to be a true patriot, you're going to have to fight for this a little bit. And if you believe in this country, you're going to have to fight for it a little bit. You won't be alone. There's a lot of us out there willing to do it with you. Bobby Kennedy said, well, I'll see you at the, what he calls it? See you at the barricades. That's one of his favorite lines. So I like that one.
So let's go to the barricades.
We'll see you at the barricades. But in the meantime, please share this with all your friends and family. They need this information too.
We hope you'll join us for episode 4 as we bust some more vaccine myths, spotlight the MMR vaccine and the COVID-19 injection, and provide you with many more life-saving remedies. Here's a brief preview.
What business does an educational institution have promoting a pharmaceutical product?
It's as bad as any tobacco science there ever was. They create bogus studies. They manipulate the data.
So once we went to these shots and then removed all liability, the game was on in the cult of scientism. It never was science.
They're very blatantly saying, no, it's about you believe in what we say, and that's scientism.
What they're doing and what the system and what the satanic plan is to get everybody enrolled into scientism, which means, science will come up with an answer. And that science is big pharma. So there's a pandemic, and then we're going to have science figure it all out, and then we're going to all inject everybody, and it's all going to be better.
What did Pope Francis say? He said the world only needs 2 things. It needs to defund its militaries worldwide, and the world needs more vaccines.
They would say that measles is a deadly disease. But it's not. And we create fear because we need to use that fear to get people to get vaccinated.
The outbreaks that we see with mumps and measles, at least half of the cases are fully vaccinated, so it's obvious that those don't work.
The Cochrane collaboration looked at more than 60 studies of pre and post licensure of the MMR vaccine, and they said that it's largely inadequate to determine the safety profile of this vaccine.
The MMR shot stands for measles, mumps, and rubella. And the rubella fraction of the MMR vaccine is made from cells of aborted fetal tissue. And we've known that since the 1960s. It leads to a very toxic cytokine stimulation of inflammation in your system. And it leads to a more of a toxic type of effect than almost any of the other vaccines in the schedule.
The concern here is that multiple vaccines trigger a hyperimmune response, a febrile seizure that could precipitate a neuropsychiatric disorder, such as autism spectrum disorder, Asperger's, or clinical autism.
They also found, which they did not expect, that black boys were at very high risk of autism following MMR.
So black boys who received the vaccine on time
at a 3.86 relative risk. That means a 386% greater chance of getting an autism diagnosis than black boys who did not.
What did they do?
He and his 4 fellow scientists were called into a conference room at CDC headquarters, and they were asked to bring their race-related data. In other words, their data that was relevant to black boys. And they were asked to bring it into the conference room. He instructed the scientists to dump the data on race, the race-related data, into those 4 large garbage cans. And they destroyed it. And then they published that study without that data.
They wrote a paper which said something completely different. That MMR vaccines not associated with autism, there's no need to be concerned.
It showed the dirty underbelly of the CDC, that they do lie, that they do hide, and sort of this paper trail that I've put together over the past 20 years on the CDC that showed that they've lied regarding mercury in vaccines, they lied regarding the MMR vaccine, and they say with absolutely no basis whatsoever that vaccines do not cause autism.
Same thing happened with my nephew, who was badly vaccine injured in California and diagnosed at age 3 with autism. He went from not being able to speak to speaking completely fine, and he's a fully functional 7-year-old right now.
And the solution is detoxing as fast as you can, not putting more chemicals and more shots into your system every 6 months and everything like that, with more chemicals and more chemicals and more chemicals.
We did use DMSA. We also used DMPS.
EDTA is a chelator. In Latin, that means claw. So it grabs the heavy metal like a claw. And so if you have a lot of, say, lead or mercury in your bloodstream, then the chelator will grab that, make it very heavy because now it's weighed down by this weight or this claw called EDTA, and then it will come out in your urine.
Did a double-blind placebo-controlled study that was published in 2015 by Bob Navio in San Diego that showed that serum in the boys would start talking again and made eye contact again and took the flame down in their brain.
It's one of these things that we look at on the horizon that could indeed be a game changer.
There have been studies showing that populations that take adequate amounts of vitamin A have a much lower incidence of contracting the measles.
So vitamin A is a natural treatment for measles. So is vitamin C, turmeric, zinc, and quercetin are things that help with any type of viral infection.
Many years ago, we utilized the nosode for the measles, in fact, and you can actually convert homeopathic into homeopathic form, the actual substances in total of a measles vaccine, for instance, converted into homeopathic form.
Natural infection to measles, there's been shown a reduced risk of non-Hodgkin's and Hodgkin's lymphomas. There's been a reduce in cardiovascular disease for adults later on in life.
There are quite a few natural supplements that are scientifically shown to denature the spike protein itself. For example, there's one study that talks about a combination of bromelain and acetylcysteine, which is, there's a form of that in NAC as a common nutritional supplement.
I personally would be buying up NAC if I were you. The FDA is trying to take that off the market because it is so effective.
One thing that I recommend that everybody do is take an aspirin a day, baby aspirin a day, that helps minimize clotting. There's actually a study at Vanderbilt that we've been working with a little bit that shows that NAD infusions will help people with long COVID symptoms or post-COVID vaccination issues.
This is a supplement that everyone watching this needs to be taking. There's just no question about it. It's dirt cheap. I mean, a year supply is just a few dollars. That's it, a few dollars. I mean, it's crazy.
Science has never settled, period. We are constantly learning new things all the time, and to believe that science is settled is ludicrous. I've seen this used politically, and it's absolutely asinine and laughable. Any scientist who believes science is settled is, quite frankly, not a scientist.